What makes an ordinary small-town relationship turn into a horrific crime that shocked an entire community? Today, we're diving deep into a case that will leave you questioning how someone could commit such a heinous act against one of society's most vulnerable. Welcome to the Real Crime Diary, Daily Dose of Crime. I'm Sean Dupree, and the story I'm about to share with you is not just another murder case. It's a disturbing tale of betrayal, manipulation, and unthinkable cruelty that unfolded in the quiet town of Marion, Iowa. At the center of our story is Melody Hoffman, a 20-year-old woman with the mind of a 14-year-old girl whose trust and innocence made her an easy target. What started as a search for love and acceptance would ultimately lead to one of the most shocking crimes in Marion's recent history. How did a simple breakup escalate into a calculated act of violence? And what dark secret lay at the heart of this tragedy? Melody Hoffman lived a life that many would consider sheltered. Despite being 20 years old, she had the cognitive abilities of a 14-year-old due to her intellectual disability. She lived with her mother and, perhaps most notably, had no real friends to speak of. This isolation, combined with her trusting nature, made her particularly vulnerable to manipulation. Like many young women her age, Melody yearned for attention and companionship. She dreamed of having a boyfriend, someone to share her life with. That's when McKinley Louisma, a 23-year-old from Hiawatha, entered the picture. For Melody, this wasn't just any relationship. This was her first boyfriend, her first real taste of romantic love. But there were warning signs from the start. Melody's trusting nature and lack of experience in relationships made her easy to control. She would do anything to maintain this connection, this feeling of being wanted. What she didn't realize was that while she was falling deeply in love, Louisma had other priorities. Earlier that evening, security footage from a local Walmart painted a chilling picture of premeditation. McKinley Louisma, Dakota Van Patten, and Logan Kimpton were seen purchasing an arsenal of items that would later become evidence: machetes, rubber gloves, and bizarrely flavored water and cookies. Louisma himself stepped up to the register to pay for these items, leaving a digital trail of their preparations. Melody's mother, using a tracking app on her daughter's phone, watched in real time as Melody's location showed her at Morgan Creek Park, west of Cedar Rapids. What she couldn't have known was that her daughter had willingly gotten into a car with Louisma and Van Patten, a fatal decision stemming from the lingering trust she still held for her ex-boyfriend. The digital breadcrumbs continued to tell the story. Phone records, electronic data, and surveillance footage would later reveal the horrifying journey these men took with Melody that night. They knew she would still trust them enough to get in the car. They knew she would still believe in the good of people, even those who meant her harm. In the end, this trust would be weaponized against her in the most devastating way possible. All the while, Melody's mother watched those location dots moving across her screen, unaware that she was witnessing the last movements her daughter would ever make. The night was far from over, and Morgan Creek Park was just the beginning of a journey that would shock an entire community to its core. As investigators began piecing together the events of that fateful night, crucial evidence emerged from Louisma's vehicle. Inside, they discovered a paracord, a blood-stained knife, and multiple machetes, tools that would become central to unraveling this horrific crime. While Louisma admitted to handling these items, he claimed Van Patten had also used them, setting the stage for a complex web of conflicting accounts. The investigation took an interesting turn when surveillance footage from a local Walmart revealed Louisma, Van Patten, and Kimpton purchasing machetes and rubber gloves earlier that evening. The seemingly mundane addition of flavored water and cookies to their purchase would later stand in stark contrast to their alleged intentions. Trevor Weiss, an acquaintance who knew Louisma as Ken, provided a crucial piece of testimony. The day after the murder, Louisma approached him with an unusual request to provide a false alibi, claiming they had spent the entire night playing video games together. This desperate attempt to establish an alibi raised immediate red flags for investigators. More witnesses came forward with chilling accounts. Brandon Monson testified that Kimpton had actually revealed plans for the murder beforehand, though many had dismissed it as another one of his dark jokes. Even more disturbing was the testimony of Taya Meyer, who described a visibly shaken Van Patten confessing to the murder, cryptically stating that it had to be done. However, the defense painted a different picture. While acknowledging Louisma's presence at both crime scenes, they emphasized a crucial detail. None of his DNA was found on the murder weapons. Instead, the DNA evidence pointed to Hoffman, Kimpton, and Van Patten, creating reasonable doubt about Louisma's direct involvement in the violence. The prosecution's seemingly straightforward case suddenly faced unexpected complications, raising questions about the true extent of each suspect's involvement in this horrific crime. This case forces us to confront some deeply troubling questions about our society. How does someone with the vulnerability and trust of Melody Hoffman become the target of such unthinkable violence? What drives three young men to allegedly plan and execute such a brutal crime against someone who, by all accounts, was simply seeking connection and acceptance? The details of this case are particularly haunting when we consider the premeditation involved. The late-night shopping trip for weapons, the calculated manipulation of Melody's trust, and the attempts to cover their tracks afterward. It speaks to a level of planning that makes this crime all the more disturbing. But perhaps the most chilling aspect is how this tragedy might have been prevented. Could more support systems for vulnerable young adults have made a difference? What about the warning signs, like Kimpton's alleged advance revelation of the murder plot, that were dismissed as dark humor? These are questions we must grapple with as a society. The investigation continues to unfold, with DNA evidence adding new layers of complexity to an already challenging case. As we wait for justice to run its course, we're left to wonder, in a world where such calculated violence can occur, how do we better protect our most vulnerable? What changes need to be made in our communities to prevent such senseless acts of violence? Think about these questions, and we'll explore more compelling cases of justice and injustice tomorrow on The Real Crime Diary. Hey listeners, welcome back to The Real Crime Diary. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. If you tuned in last time, we had a deep dive into the disturbing history of power abuse across different eras, looking at the connection between dominance, control, and how it plays out even today. We touched on scandals from the past and compared them with some modern-day examples, showing how these patterns of abuse, unfortunately, persist. One of the most insightful tools we've explored to understand this is my book, Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's not just a historical account, but an interdisciplinary approach to understanding why this keeps happening. We draw from history, philosophy, and modern case studies to explain how figures like Dominique Pellicot, Harvey Weinstein, and others have exploited their positions of power for their own gain, often protected by the very systems meant to stop them. Recap of last interaction. In our last live stream, we discussed how libertinism, philosophically introduced by figures like Marquis de Sade, has shaped the way power and pleasure have been entangled throughout history. This concept ties directly into how figures like Weinstein operated, as we saw parallels between de Sade's fictional characters and the way powerful men manipulated their victims in real life. You guys had some amazing comments, asking how societal structures have allowed these behaviors to go unchecked for so long. It's a crucial question, and one that the book addresses deeply. Why this book is valuable. Now, what's powerful about Power, Pleasure, and Pain is its ability to break down these historical patterns and link them to the present. You're not just reading about ancient Rome or Enlightenment philosophy, you're seeing how these ideologies are alive today. The book uncovers how sexual violence and control have been systematically woven into the fabric of societies from ancient times right up to the modern era. It's about understanding not just the individual predators, but the systems that protect them, whether it's in royal courts, religious institutions, or today's corporate and entertainment worlds. Through these historical lenses, we also explore movements like #MeToo that are beginning to dismantle these structures. The fight for justice is far from over, but as the book demonstrates, we are in the midst of a cultural shift where legal reforms are finally addressing these long-standing issues. It's more than a history lesson. It's a guide to understanding and supporting change today. What's next? If you want to dive deeper, I suggest picking up Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's available now, and trust me, it will change the way you think about power, pleasure, and control. We've even got some exclusive content coming up on the channel where we'll be exploring the book's case studies in even more detail, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to The Real Crime Diary so you don't miss any updates. Let's keep this conversation going, because understanding the past is key to changing the future.